So welcome, Temple. This is the first time we're speaking, so this is going to be an interesting interview. I met Temple over a Twitter thread, no less, and we kind of started talking, and I was like, this should be a podcast or an interview. She said yes, and here we are. Temple, do you want to give a quick intro about yourself and kind of how you came into the ketogenic space, being a dietitian, kind of your journey a little bit there?
Yeah. I think this is the funnest way to get into podcasts is kind of organically. But yeah, my name's Temple Steward. I'm a registered dietitian. I was conventionally trained as a dietitian. I kind of fell into the ketogenic space by my own health journey, which I think is a lot of people's stories when they get into this kind of alternative health platform. And so, I was just really sick and conventional medicine wasn't working for me, even when I was implementing all the practices I had learned in conventional medicine. And so I, got frustrated and went to alternative medicine. And that was what ended up healing me. I was a Division I athlete, super healthy my whole life, and found alternative medicine. And that's what was the ticket and the key to my health success. And so that's why I went this route and ended up using it to help others. And so that's kind of what landed me on the platform that I am now, and what really gave me this passion and fire for what I'm doing now. I'm in med school right now to become a naturopathic doctor, and I'm loving it and super busy, but enjoying every minute of it, really.
Super cool. Super cool. I want to dive into, you mentioned a couple things there. One was you were super sick. Was that when you were super young, recently? Like how did that illness come about and what was it specifically?
Yeah, so I grew up in South Mississippi. If anybody knows anything about the South, I grew up on, typical Southern home cooking, fried, hearty, delicious food. But I was a bit overweight as a kid. I was adopted, so I was raised on formula. I was not,
Mm,
I didn't have a super healthy childhood. I was always like the chunky kid. I probably had some pre-diabetes PCOS issues as a kid, but I was always super athletic. I played every sport as a kid. I went into college playing D1 soccer, which I think just being forced into that, level of activity, I think masked a lot of the, I never really got into the obesity category. I was just always kind of chunky. And so that kind of masked a lot of the symptoms I think I would have had I not been an athlete. And so in college is when I really started to get a little bit of the knowledge that something could be off. I always started having issues with my cycle. It was just never really regular. I started having some of that cystic acne. I definitely always had some of the mood issues. I was, never really like I wasn't always unstable, but I just never really felt like super stable mood wise. And so I remember going to a nurse practitioner in college and just being like, something's off with my cycle. Like it's never regular like everyone else's. Like it'll come or it'll skip 4 or 5 months at a time. And they chalked it up to, oh, well, you're running 90 minutes playing soccer all the time. Like we don't expect you to have a regular cycle. And they threw me on birth control, of course. And
mm,
so that masked it for a couple of years. And then I, found this interest in nutrition, and I did start eating healthier in college, but I didn't really lose weight because I was eating quote unquote healthier, but that was really just more grains and legumes. And so I was really still eating a lot of starch, which kind of at the time I had PCOS, which I didn't know, but
mm,
that really fueled the PCOS. And so I didn't lose weight. And then ultimately what it came to is I got a PCOS diagnosis as a registered dietitian. And then they, gave me the whole metformin spironolactone bit, and I still was just like, okay, well, this isn't helping anything. It's just another band-aid, and then so that's ultimately when I started to dig a little bit deeper. Was like I just got really frustrated with all the band-aids, like birth control band-aid, spironolactone band-aid, metformin band-aid. Like
mm.
none of it was actually treating any of the root causes. And then even just the nutritional advice was, eat more whole grains. Well, that's not treating the blood glucose. Like my sugars were still high. So ultimately, I think it came down to a lot of frustration with the advice I was being
Mhm.
given, you know.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great context. And it's eerily similar to a lot of stories I've had on the show. What was it about you, like, so you intuitively, you kind of knew, hey, this is band-aids. Was there a
Mhm.
point in time or a specific, was it the birth control, or was it, like there was a stack of things that kept being given to you that you're like, no, it's not working, it's not working? Was it since the beginning you kind of intuitively knew, you're like, I mean, this is going to help a little bit, but in the long term it's not? Or was it there was a point in time where you're like, look, this is not helping any of this stuff. It's been years of headaches and sickness and illness. Was there that moment, and how did you come about it?
This is a great question. And so I've always been like a bit of a critical thinker, and I've always innately believed in the body's ability to heal. Like I've always believed that, like,
Yeah.
one, I really believe we're intricately and really like super complex, and our body is super cool in its ability to heal itself. And I believe that we were designed to, it's just amazing. The human body is just, taking physiology classes at a doctorate level has given me this appreciation for our bodies that I've never expected to have. And I think that's always been in me to some degree. And yes, to answer your question, I just got frustrated with the lack of ability of these doctors to explain to me how this was going to be able to help me. Like the nurse practitioner giving me the birth control, but not being able to explain, like, okay,
Mm.
is this going to fix the problem? And the icing on the cake for me was when I went to a full on OBGYN. And this is when I got my PCOS diagnosis. I had given blood work, I had given labs and got my labs back. And at this point, I was pretty convinced because I was a full-on dietitian. I'd done my research. I pretty much well knew what I was going to get diagnoses-wise when I went back. And he told me, and it was a little bit snarky, and maybe I was just reading
Mm.
it wrong, and it could have been
Yeah.
my attitude, honestly.
Yeah.
But he told me, he was like, you know what, you're probably not going to get pregnant. Go ahead and start saving money, and come back when you're ready to have a baby. And I remember it just felt super belittling and like
Mm.
very like it was very like you have no hope, like you're not going to fix this, like you're dependent on me. Like it was just very demeaning to me. And
Yeah.
again, this all could have been in my head, and I just probably had a bad attitude about the whole thing. But all that was given to me, and I remember specifically asking, because I'm a nutrition, I was a dietitian. I was like, okay, well, what can I do food wise? Like, is there something? Is there a supplement? Is there anything? Like,
Yeah.
there's got to be some natural realm. I can at least help myself, right? And I remember him saying that to me, like, no, just save some money. Like, you're gonna have to go on IVF or do all these things. And I remember that was the icing on the cake for me. And I was like, you know what? And I'd always have a very competitive like spirit
Yeah.
about me. And I remember like, oh yeah, like no, no, sir, like you're never gonna see me again. Like I'm gonna come back to you and I'm gonna be pregnant, and so to me, it was more of
With
like a challenge.
twins.
Yeah, yeah, it was more of a challenge than anything.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving that office, and I remember immediately, and nowadays we live in such an information overload that I remember getting on social media, and the first two names I came across were Dr. Benjamin Bickman. And I come across these, I talk about this
Hmm.
on every podcast because it was such a pivotal moment of my life.
Yeah.
And now we're colleagues in a sense, and he knows this. But Dr. Benjamin Bickman and Dr. Jason Fung were two of the most pivotal like influencers in my life because I dove into their work, and
Yeah.
that was really what made the shift for me. And Verta Health, because they ended up doing a study at the hospital that I was at, and it just
Mm.
completely, it was like the light came on for me, and I dove into their work. I immediately started the ketogenic diet, and I mean, I tell everyone it was like the light bulb came on. I started dropping weight. My
Mm.
cycle returned within like 3 to 4 months. I lost the acne. This cloud over my life lifted, and
Yeah.
I remember thinking like that was it. Like that was all I needed to do was like stop eating like all these starches and legumes. And I'm not saying everyone needs to cut these foods out. I'm just saying for my disease state in that moment, that was what was
Hmm.
appropriate. And so yeah, it was just incredible. So, it was just that was a shifting point in my life. That was like the icing on the cake. Was I just needed to hear that guy tell me like you're gonna depend on me. It was a bit of a challenge.
So the secret to health is have a doctor belittle you. You guys
Yeah,
heard it.
yeah.
You heard it here first.
Get real gaslit in the office and you'll change your life.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
Amazing. Only because I had a very similar. So eerie how, I had severe Crohn's at one point in my life. I was scheduled for surgery. They're like, basically, so I'm 6'4". I lost 50 pounds in 3 months.
My
And I
gosh.
was playing basket like a competitive basketball player, very similar, like story to you is like very comparable. When
Yeah.
people saw me, it was like there was no way you don't react, right? You saw a
Yeah.
skeleton, you're like, are you dying? Like you basically
Yeah.
look like you are. I was embarrassed to go out of the house because I was like, what just happened to my life?
Yeah.
And I remember I told the doctor, I went into the office, I was like, hey, I changed my diet. I'm reading all these other things and whatever. He's like, none of that matters. He's like, that's not going to help you. You need to just go on drugs and get the surgery, in as many words. And so I was really pissed, just like you. I'm like, well, what do you mean? If I'm seeing progress, how is that not working? Right.
Yeah.
So when I went for pre-ops, they're like, wow, you got better really fast. Like we've never seen this. We're going to call off the surgery. And I was like, are you not going to ask me why I specifically got better and nobody else did? I was like, they're like, no, diet doesn't. And even then they're like, yeah, just go eat a burger. Like you deserve it, right? And I'm not saying burgers are bad. I'm going to get roasted for this, but what the second thing you said was in my disease state, I had to do things differently
Yeah.
than now. Like I can smash a whole pizza right now and I have some repercussions for sure. I can't just be Superman after eating a whole pizza. I'll be lethargic, a little bit lazy the next day, whatever. I can do it. Back then, if I ate a whole pizza, I'd be in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
So I loved
Yeah.
how you prefaced it with, in that disease state, I had to do something that made sense for my body. And maybe now it's different, but when you're really sick, people don't understand. You did extreme things to get really sick over a long period of time. You got to do extreme things to get
Yeah.
unsick and then kind of play around with it. And it seems like that's exactly how you approached it. And in vengeance against the doctor.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It does blow my mind how little conventional medicine addresses nutrition in life. The
Yeah.
times that I have been involved in conventional medicine, even as a dietitian working in a hospital, it's like we're not going to
Yeah.
ask them what they're eating. We're not going to ask them, are they stressed? Are they sleeping?
Yeah.
It's wild.
Why do you think that is? And I always ask this question. I get various answers, but I'd love because you've worked in a hospital, you're a registered dietitian, you're going to school now to be a naturopath. So
Yeah.
you have seen pockets of the system in different ways. You've gone through it as an athlete, as somebody living in the South. What if you had to boil it down to a couple things? Where's your head at? Is why is this not considered ever, basically?
Well, I ultimately, and I want to say this too, because first of all, there are doctors that are absolutely turning the tide. Like I have been around some doctors in the VA that I'm like, you are cut from a different cloth. Like you get it, you know that nutrition and lifestyle matter. And then I've been around the ones that are like
Yeah.
so drug pushers that it doesn't matter that you could have your experience where you come in and you've healed ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, and it doesn't even matter to them. So
Yeah.
I'm certainly not umbrella or blanket statement everyone, but ultimately I think it comes down to training. I think doctors don't have enough time with clients and patients. I think that they're pressed for time. I think that insurance has ruined 99% of everything. They've got the way that they get paid is all based on the whole system is just really jacked up from the top down in terms of like
Yeah.
what they're paid on isn't healing. Sick and healed patients don't make money, and it's not the doctor's fault.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it comes down to money, and so I think that is the root of it, really, and it's sad, and then it comes down to what's being taught in med schools. It's not nutrition. It's not lifestyle. They don't know these things, and I've had the
Mhm.
the like the I've been around some great doctors, you know, and being in the ketogenic space and going to these conferences and speaking to these conferences, I've got to meet a lot of these doctors who left conventional medicine because of these things and are now in this space, and they're just as frustrated as all of us. And they're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to participate in that. I want to help heal my clients. And they're really speaking out against the system. And so I think it does. I think it comes down to money. I think it comes down to time. I think it comes down to reimbursement. I think it comes down to a lot of things like that, big establishment. And so, yeah, it's multifactorial. But the good thing is I think there's a lot of hope in terms of the tide is definitely shifting. I think the tide is definitely shifting among consumers as well. People are fleeing conventional medicine. You know, I've had so many physicians tell me, like, if I could go back, I would go back to naturopathic doctor school because people are like running to see NDs. So I think the demand is great for natural medicine and nutrition and lifestyle. And even what you're doing, even the medical technologies and stuff like that, people are getting access to this stuff, which is truly incredible because it's putting the power back into the patient's hands to take control, which is I think is amazing in a lot of ways.
Gotcha. So essentially, in essence, insurance, the way it's incentivized, is primarily where you're at in your headspace, and a lot of the time that comes up. Now, and I get a lot of slack for this because I always try to tell people, let's look at the doctor's side of things. They have 7 minutes to see 100 patients in a day. They can barely do anything, and then they're going to get sued if they give you something outside of the scope of what insurance is going to cover because it's so litigious. And like, I've been roasted for saying that. I'm like, I'm just trying to give you the perspective, you know, like you can yell at me. I'm just trying to show you what they're dealing with, you know?
Yeah. They also don't know, like doctors take like less than like 10 hours or something of nutrition. And what they do learn is like, what's a carb, what's a fat, what's a protein. They don't know anything about supplements. They don't know anything about nutrition. They definitely don't know anything about alternative diet. You know, and it also comes back to the patients because a lot of patients come in there demanding a quick fix. So a lot of it comes back to like the patient themselves. A lot of people aren't willing to put in the work to heal. A lot of people aren't willing to put in the work to change their diet, you know, unfortunate as it is, you know. So there's a weird conundrum of there's a lot of people that do want healing and a lot of people that are willing to put in the work, but a lot of doctors just don't know, you know, and a lot are influenced by the whole low fat fad and all that nonsense that came down from the government and all that. And that'll probably get, you know, me in trouble, but you know, you're right. You're spot on.
Yeah. Talk more about what's going to get you in trouble. We want to know.
We can say that. We can say that, the government in itself.
Yeah, no, it's, I totally get your sentiment. Let's go now into the juicy part of why we set this call up in the first place.
Yeah.
So let's talk about diet wars. Where are you at with it? I know you called some people out on Twitter. Me and you had a discussion about that. I'd love for you to share kind of what you've seen and what's going on in the space.
Gosh, you know, and shoot, I'm like thinking back, I can't even remember what it was. I'm in the heat of a battle right now, and like I had to put my phone down yesterday. You know, I'm not sure if you know him. His name's Brian Sanders. If you don't know him, you should get him on your podcast because he's awesome. He's a big regenerative agriculture guy. He's in Austin, Texas. He goes by the name of Food Lies on Instagram, but he's really big into like replenishing the soil, like big cattle guy. He has his own farms. He's amazing. You would really, really like him. Amazing. Anyway, he posted a clip of a house episode that had, it was just a short clip of like a family came in, they were feeding their infant almond milk, and this was on House, you know, on national television, and this family was feeding their infant almond milk, which we know is extremely detrimental. You cannot feed an infant almond milk. I don't care what planet you live on, it's just not going to work. Anyway, House was like, you can't do this. Your infant's going to die. Like, it literally will kill an infant. You cannot do this. And so anyway, I commented on the dang video and I said, like, I said, this is child abuse. You cannot feed an infant almond milk. Like, I did
Yeah.
not think in any world that this would be a controversial statement. Sure enough, it was. And so, I wake up yesterday morning, I had like 57 DMs in my Instagram, which is, a little bit much for me. And I had like 100 and something comments all over my Instagram page.
Yeah.
And look, I go to a naturopathic medicine school. I have people of all friends that follow all sorts of diet, vegan, pescatarian, vegetarian, you name it. I have a friend that follows it and I'm cool with everyone, but it was all vegan, like messages. I
Yeah.
hope your children die. I hope you die. Just complete.
Crazy.
So I spent 2.5 hours yesterday morning reporting people. You cannot send me a death threat. You know what I'm saying? Like, I accept a lot of things, but like telling me that my kids should die is not on my list of things that I'll accept over Instagram. And the thing is, to me, the diet wars, we all have good intentions. And I even respect a lot of personally, I would never go vegan. I don't think it's optimal. I think it can be a good health strategy for some. Like it's definitely an improvement versus the standard American diet. It's not for you, but if it's for you, do it. And anyway, I'm saying all that to say we're all trying to fix the same problem. People are dying of diseases that can be prevented. And I just feel like there's these battles, and it's like if we could just unite, so many more people would be saved. But here we are flashing on Instagram. And granted, I probably shouldn't have wrote that comment on that video because I kind of started it. then again, the clashing is it's just so detrimental. It's just so anyway, I'm rambling on, but I never would have imagined the backlash over almond milk in infants. And I just think that it's so overall the sentiment is overall, we all want to see people healthier, and whatever way it happens, I don't really care. I really don't. Like if it's eat more vegetables, eat more plant-based, eat meat, whatever the case is, like however it works for you, it's just let's just help people not die of chronic disease, and I don't care which way we do it, but it's a mess. It's a mess. I don't know what else to say about it. It's a mess.
No, and you're spot on. This is what I see all the time. And this is how me and Temple started talking, because I basically made a claim to her that all diets are tribalism, right? So like back in the day, when you got part of a tribe, if you left that tribe back in the day, you basically are dead. There's no question. Like no one else is going to let you in their tribe, or you're going to battle a Black Panther and you're going to die that way, or you're going to starve to death, right? Like it was basically like no way of survival. And I've seen this a lot of times where somebody has their identity and then they're like, I have a huge following now. I can't say I was wrong, and I have to keep keeping this persona of, I think Saladino, what's his name? Paul Saladino, he started all carnivore and then now he's carnivore. Oh, and fruit. Yeah. So he adds these things and I was like, at least he's owning up to it, right? Yeah. He's saying, look, I have new data. I'm going to change my mind or whatever.
Yeah. And people were ready to crucify him for it. And it's like,
100%. And I knew it. I was like, as soon as he changes his mind, oh, you're a phony, you're a con artist, etc. Fair. I get where they're coming from, but if he's right or his research is showing something else, I have to tell them like, look, just like, at least he's admitting it. Other people will never say that, right? They'll just say, no, it has to be this and keep selling books and supplements and whatever. We don't have to talk about Liver King, but look what happened there. Like $15,000 of steroids a month. Yeah. Ancestral living, right? Like,
oh my gosh.
That's probably the least, out of all the things he could have done, that was probably the most unaligned with his brand. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I'm sure he started once and he was like, oh, I can't say this, I did it now. And he kept saying, I'm natural. Where it was like, you have to lie, like, so I totally understand where you're coming from. And that's why I think it's, once you wrap identity into anything, it's kind of like religion. It's kind of like, it's really hard for people to then go back on it because they're like, no, this is who I am. And if I'm not these people won't accept me. Right. And
Yeah.
that plays out all the time in 100x magnitude now, especially online. And I see it, with politics, I see it with religion, I see it with diet war, with anything really, with
Yeah.
brands. I remember when I was a kid, people would hate on people because they liked Coke over Pepsi when the Coke Pepsi challenge was going on. They're like, no, Coke is trash. Like, you have to like Pepsi. And I was like,
Doesn't matter.
it's just Coke,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And it's
Mhm.
it's so interesting. And now knowing what I know now, because I started my Instagram and even my Twitter. My Instagram is by far my biggest platform. Like my Twitter is like I do it kind of for fun, and I have like more of my professional friends on there. But
Yeah.
I'm there on Instagram as the ketogenic nutritionist. I have 100,000 people on there, and on Twitter it's a little smaller, but I look back and I'm like, man, should I have named it the ketogenic nutritionist? Because that's my niche. Like that's my favorite thing. That's what I'm
Yeah.
primarily ketogenic. But people always assume that I'd never eat carbs. And
Yeah.
and I'll get this question all the time. They're like, oh, do you ever eat carbs? I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I eat carbs. Like I believe in strategic carb management. Like just use them smart. Like just
Yeah.
don't be eating like flour, sugar all the time. Right? Like, just eat a healthy diet. So I found myself, I'm like, so
Yeah.
I love that you bring this conversation up because it's very easy to pigeonhole people.
Yeah.
And it like totally self-inflicted, right? Like totally self-inflicted on my part. But I think, and I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's an interesting topic that you bring up, and I think you're spot on with it. But it's so funny how we are so quick to attack people for it, and
Yeah.
I do this too, like, or judge people
Yeah.
for even like moving or switching or having different opinions, or saying something that may sway. And I love Dr. Bickman. One time I was listening to one of his, if you can't tell, I'm a huge fan. I think he's
Yeah.
like
He's great.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. He's great.
super humble too. But I heard him say on a podcast one time, because he's like the guy when it comes to insulin resistance. I listen to everyone, but like when he speaks on insulin resistance, I'm like, what
Yeah.
you're talking.
Right.
But he said one time, and I loved it. He was like, I hope something comes out that proves me wrong. And I was like, man, I rarely hear people say that, like
Yeah.
especially on that platform, because like not his whole life is built on it, but like his whole career for at least some degree.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have no idea where I'm going with this, but I really respect that mentality of like, don't we all need to be like that? Like I hope
Mhm.
something comes out that's better, or I hope something comes out that can help people more, to some degree at least, you
Yeah.
know.
It's interesting you say that, because I think that's the most frustrating thing anybody goes through, including myself, right? Because when I'm experimenting and then I read a contradiction, I'm like, I know it's more work for me to now go deeper. And as humans, we're just lazy, right? We're like, why can't keto just cure everything? It's like there
I know.
might be a situation where it's, like if you are allergic to meat,
Yep.
that's going to be a little bit harder. You got to do that vegan keto, or
Yep.
like there's going to be exceptions there to these rules,
Yep.
because all of the diets, like you said, will work they'll work to an extent of if you're getting off an American diet, eating processed
Yeah.
foods, like no brainer, any diet will work. Like, you could throw a dart on a board and try one, and it's going to work, right? Yeah. So, I think to your point though, this is the frustrating thing, because I've seen in the news, eggs are bad, eggs are good, eggs are bad, eggs are good, eggs are bad. It's like, which one is it? Milk is bad, inflammatory. Now it's not anymore, So it's like,
It's
what part
brutal.
of, yeah. And I think this is the like frustration that a lot of people face, even providers, right? I think this is another thing. And maybe you can speak on this, given that you are one.
Yeah.
You're probably always trying to do the best with your clients, getting the new information. And then, when it contradicts, probably you don't feel like you're like, I've been giving this advice forever, and if it was wrong, I'm sure there's some gut feeling of like, oh no, like I've been saying this for years, might not have been true, right? So do you feel that that's part of like a struggle that you have as a provider working with people, and does it get confusing, and how do you kind
Yeah.
of navigate that space?
So, I used to come from a place of like, and this is, I think, just growing and maturing just a person, but I used to come from a place of like, oh, I'm a dietitian. I know it
Yeah.
all. Like, shoot, I don't know jack squat, and like stuff is changing all the time.
Yeah.
And I am honestly like, I have just started especially like people like genuinely listen. Like I realize that people like really listen to what I'm saying, and
Yeah.
I have come from a place of like they really they buy what I tell them to buy, and they listen to what I'm saying. Like I have to be very, very, very cautious, and I have just started being completely open and honest. I do not know. I'm like, I do not know. I think dairy could be inflammatory for some people. I think some people tolerate it fine. For me, it did not work. Like it gives me acne. I don't really know why. I don't think it's that great for people with PCOS. Like I have gotten so humbled in my life. Like I really genuinely care so much about the people that I work with. They trust me with their time. They trust me with large amounts of money. Like I've gotten to the point where like I want them to see results. I want them to feel so good. And the last thing I want to do is steer them in the wrong direction. I just remember how bad I felt and how so sick I was, and that all I wanted was somebody to like extend their hand towards me and just help and listen. Like just even if they just heard me out and like just tried to help, like even if it was, and so I got real humble real quick, because I really realized, and you know how nutrition research is, half of it's a load of junk, and it's a hot mess. And so I tell my clients that I'm like, you read these studies and it's appalling. Like it is appalling. You want to shake somebody, because it's like, who's doing this? Who's funding it? It's, if they spent a quarter of the money that they spent on this nutrition research that they do on pharmaceuticals, we'd be, 100% better than we are right now. And so I don't know. I have just gotten to the point of like, if I don't know without a shadow of a doubt, I tell them, I'm like, just try it. If you feel better, listen to your body. I think there's so much stuff we have no idea about, like, for instance, gut health. I think we haven't even come close to the surface of what there is in terms of microbiome and diversity and, hormonal health. I mean, you have Crohn's. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis after my daughter was born, my 2-year-old. They don't know nothing about IBD. I'm just saying, they don't know anything. The best they have is biologics, and they don't even barely know how those work. And so, it's those kinds of things that I'm just like, let's try it and let's do some experimentation. I think it's so miraculous almost that we're coming out with these medical technologies, CGMs and Dexcom and Freestyle Libres and stuff like that, that we're able to see a lot of this cool stuff. And even just the testing that we're being able to do, the stool sampling and all the cool heavy metals and all that we're able to do nowadays. I'm rambling. I think all this stuff is really helpful. But to answer your question, I've gotten real humbled, and I just want to help my clients the best I can. But nowadays it's hard to say without a shadow of a doubt on some things. So I'm honest, and I'll tell them if it's controversial. For instance, milk, and dairy and intermittent fasting for women. Another problem I deal with a lot too is nutrition research on women. A lot of this stuff is done on men. There's such a lack of research on women and cycles. Like you'll 100%. Find research on women, and it's like, well, what phase were they in? Were they pregnant? Were they lactating? Like we have no idea where they were. Were they in menopause, perimenopause? Were they reproductive? We don't know. And so I tell them that too. I work with a lot of menopausal women. I work with a lot of different cycle, like where they are in their cycle. So I think that's a huge challenge as well.
Yeah, all great points. Going quickly to the milk thing and then back to women.
Yeah.
It was interesting because in the States, you can't get raw milk, right? You have to get pasteurized. It's illegal. I lived in Mexico half the year last year, where you can get raw milk at the corner store, right? And so because when I had disease state and it was Crohn's, which I don't have anymore, it was like, I can't, any dairy was like, not a chance. Right. And so I was like, I wonder. So I started drinking milk pretty much I hadn't drank milk in like 10 years, it was like a long time. So I started drinking the raw milk, and it was definitely a much different experience. I haven't drank non-raw milk, like very rarely sometimes, but it's like, the 40% fat organic, and that's been fine in coffee. And it's like, oh, wow, because the body changes again, like the digestive system clearly changed, the stomach changed. So
Yeah.
maybe now it's in smaller doses is not that bad actually. So again, I think people always miss exactly what you're saying. It's in context, right? Today is going to work because your body is in a certain state, and then tomorrow might work differently. And
Exactly.
it is going back to like what I was saying. I think that plus contradicting research noise the heck out of people because they're like, I want to do one thing forever. And you're like, even if you did one thing, you would get bored of that same meal every single day after 4 months. Like I used to be big on eggs every day. And then at one day I was like, I don't want eggs ever again. Like, and then it took like 4 months and I reintroduced them. Not because they're bad for me or they don't do well. Just I was so bored no matter what to eat those eggs, right? So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think, what it comes down to a lot of the time, and from what you're telling me is, there's some work involved on the end user or the consumer to do themselves, and they have to kind of be ready to do it.
Yeah.
I've found a lot of the time in talking to providers and being a consumer myself, it's a lot of it is like you said, somebody to talk to and actually understand me. And then I'm much more willing to do things versus, you're screwed, just don't do anything. It's like, why would I listen to you then? You're telling me I'm useless. So, yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
true. So true.
cool. So, yes. So looping back to women, it's so true about fasting blew up, right? About 4 years ago ish. And now it's kind of mainstream. And so, my fiance, if she tries to fast, especially if it's in the time of the month, no way.
Yep. No
Like
way.
brain fog, like basically he's gonna collapse.
Yeah.
It's like, man, we have our hormones are kind of even keel, unless
Yeah.
nowadays not so much. They're kind of in the gutter. But yeah,
Really.
like the woman's body changes so much during a month. You can't, like, she literally would pass out if she tried to
Yep.
fast, and this whole blanket statement of just do 16 and 8, it's the best thing for longevity, whatever. It's like,
Not really.
if you're passing out during the day, I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah. If you lose your cycle, it's probably
Yeah.
not a good thing for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Like your body is like, oh no, like something is wrong. So it's like, again, it has to be individually tailored to somebody. I don't see it going any other way, because otherwise it really just doesn't work, or it works in short spurts
Mhm.
and then it, kind of falls flat. So yeah,
I
thank you for pointing that out, because I think it's super important for people to realize that, and have people like you have a audience influence and are a provider, making this more well known, so that people aren't just blanketing something they heard off a podcast and then fainting.
I know.
So yeah.
I know, it's crazy. And what I love about women too is, and I'm not saying men aren't like this, I just don't have the honor of working with men often, but women are like, they're determined. And when they get a goal in their head, they're going to do it. And I
Yeah.
see that a lot. It's like, I'm an intermittent fast. I'm going to do it every day. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, pump your brakes. Like we want you to get pregnant when you want to get pregnant,
Yeah.
don't want your hair falling out. So yeah, it's an honor working with really disciplined women, because it's like, man, they're go-getters for sure. I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. All right, we have a little bit of time left.
Yeah.
I want to dive into kind of the primary thing that helped you. Why ketogenic? What made sense about it? How did it help you?
Yeah. So, well, obviously, I mean, I'm sure your followers know this. Like, we have a real issue with insulin resistance in this country. Like, it's just brutal. I was looking at statistics the other day. There's a real, I don't want to say problem, there's a real kind of trend right now among dietitians of like this intuitive eating movement, healthy at every size movement. And I don't disagree with all of it. And I'll tell you why. I think intuitive eating is good. I think the principles of it are good. I disagree with the whole like eat whatever you want whenever you want. Just given the sheer statistics of what's going on, over 90% of people are metabolically unhealthy. That includes some degree of metabolic syndrome, which we know is linked back to insulin resistance. And so ultimately, for me personally, it came down to insulin was too high in my body, which was causing a cascade of hormonal dysfunction. For me, it was too high androgens. I had very high testosterone, very high DHEA, and it was causing just an issue. Insulin is like the hormone upriver that just causes everything else to be polluted, essentially. And so when I realized this, I realized, oh shoot, I've got to do something about insulin if I want to ovulate, if I want to have my cycle back. And then once I realized all these symptoms were connected to high androgens, essentially that's what PCOS is. Now for everyone else, you can connect pretty much, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, high cholesterol in a lot of ways. Visceral obesity, all of it, not all of it, I shouldn't say all of it, a lot of it is connected in some way or the other. It just shows up differently. And so I figured, okay, this is whole food. It's very focused on healthy fats, which we know is heart healthy, all of it. If done correctly, I should add. And so that's what I started doing. I started, okay, I'm going to switch to whole foods. And so which I was doing to a degree. I was just doing a lot of grains. I was doing like a lot of rice, so much beans, like so much starch. I was doing a whole wheat everything, whole wheat pasta and whole wheat bread. And so I switched to meat, chicken, and basically just a lot of non-starchy vegetables. I lived in Florida at the time, so I had access to like really fresh seafood and fresh fish. So I ate a ton of fresh fish and a lot of those omega-3s and a lot of non-starchy vegetables. It was fantastic. I started feeling better. Like the week I started, I kid you not, I just started feeling amazing. And so it just made sense. Like once I really looked at the science and started reading into it, I was like, this just makes logical sense for what I'm dealing with and the health issues I'm having. And so that's why. And I ultimately I was like, this is fixing the root problem. I'm not slapping a Band-Aid on it. I'm not spot treating a problem. This is fixing myself from the inside out and fixing like the what's causing this hormonal cascade of dysfunction. And so that's why I chose keto. And now, people ask me all the time, like, what's your diet like now? I follow a ketogenic diet like 85% of the time. I'll occasionally have some fruit, but it's so nice because I'm so like, I hate the word fat adapted because people use it so like flippantly, myself included. But I will get right back into ketosis by tonight. Like if I have fruit this morning, I can check my ketones. I'll be right back, especially because I walk a lot and do all that. So I'm pretty flexible. Like I'll eat, but I really do try to prioritize eating just real food. I don't think we need to eliminate. I don't think fruit is what drives the obesity epidemic. People get real weird about that kind of stuff. I don't think that's the problem. I don't think cooked carrots are going to be the, what sends you over the edge, so so that's kind of what I'm doing now. And that's why keto for me.
Amazing. I think, what do you think? Cooked carrots versus a sleeve of Oreos? Which one is going to be?
Yeah, I know, right? I know, man, it kills me. I know.
It's funny you mentioned the intuitive eating, because if somebody is addicted to these foods that are highly palatable, scientifically engineered with billions of dollars to make you want them, you're going to want to eat. And like, I'm the worst at this. So if I eat a cake, I'm eating the whole cake. Like there's no question. There's no other outcome. I tell people, I'm like, no, you don't understand. If you bring a pint of ice cream to my house,
like you're eating it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, my head's gonna go every 10 minutes. You should just have more, like naturally.
The literal slogan for Lay's is bet you can't eat just one. Like they planned it. They know it.
And the thing is, people rip on those companies like it's super unhealthy, all this stuff. I've studied the history of most of them. I don't want to say all. And in the times that like in the 1920s, for example, like post World War I and like the Great Depression, it was like 50, almost like, forgot the stat, it was like 50% of Americans didn't have a job, for example. So cheap, highly palatable food that was easily accessible. And then, women joining the workforce more and more so they couldn't cook. They actually solved a lot of those problems back then and populations exploded. So to say that their inventions aren't genius, amazing, and built billion-dollar industries would be wrong. Of course they are. It's just that now we know too much of that stuff, which is all of the things we talk about. It tastes great, amazing. You get addicted to it. Of course, it was invented that way. long term for our health is just, there's a huge correlation that shows that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
So now we
Yeah.
kind of have to have new solutions to these problems.
Yeah, 100%. I get roasted online on the regular about that. You know, you're promoting eating disorders and all this other stuff, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm just being real. Like those foods hijack your hormone. Like it is nearly impossible to moderate them. You know, it's just fact. Like I
Yeah.
don't know anyone who sits down and eats the proper serving of ice cream. Like I have never done that ever. I
Yeah.
couldn't even tell you what it is. It's like, you know, a third a cup or something insane. Like nobody does it. And you know, when you realize that, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense because
Yeah.
nobody is able to physically do that. And you know, yeah, it's an interesting thing that that the intuitive eating. And again, I don't disagree. Like I think paying attention to hunger and satiation is a
Yeah.
fantastic move. But you know, I tell people all the time, like, notice how easy it is to feel full when you're eating a steak. Like it's nearly impossible to overeat steak. Like
Yeah.
you feel gross. I mean, like it's hard to overeat
Yeah.
steak. You know, like you can't. You know,
Right.
now compare that to cold cereal. I could easily put down a box of cold cereal, easily. You know? So it's like
Yeah.
just think about it logically before you comment on my next post
Yeah.
because it's like, oh man, it's funny, but we'll learn, we'll get there.
Yeah.
One day, you know.
Well, it's so complicated because I understand the people that make those comments don't feel good because
No,
they're probably unhealthy. They want to get better. I understand the situation. So when they see somebody online, and it's like you said, it's just a headline or whatever it is, you shouldn't eat, processed foods. Like, don't judge me. Like the immediate defense, because they're like, I know I shouldn't. But again, it's like this isn't hidden, right? Like there's no arguing that the foods were scientifically made by food scientists so that they're better, so you can buy more and that you like them. Like this isn't a bad thing to say, right? Like there shouldn't be an argument that that's scientifically proven. So if those foods were manufactured that way, of course you're going to be addicted to them. I'm addicted to them. As soon as I have one, I can't stop. There's just and I know all of this stuff. I'm in the health technology business, trying to make people's health better, right? And like, I can't prevent it. My fiance, we were living in Vegas for a little while, and we tried crumble cookies for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And I was looking at the menu and I was like, wow, it's 170 calories per cookie. And I'm looking at the cookie and I'm looking at her. I'm like, just something is in my head. I know too much. Yeah, I'm like, I know too much for this to be true. So I grabbed the menu and on the bottom, it's like for 1/4 of the cookie or something.
Yeah, one serving.
I was like, oh, so it's like 600 calories.
Yeah.
One cookie.
And you're totally right. Cause I think back to the time when, there is a level of like feeling out of control. Like I can remember when I was really struggling and I kind of played around with the intuitive eating, like before I got the PCOS diagnosis and I was kind of trying to eat healthy and all that. And there is a level of like, I feel almost out of control. And it is like, it kind of lowers your self-esteem. You like, don't feel in control. You feel, it is almost like a level of shame. And I do think you're spot on when it's those people that are the ones that are firing off, because it almost feels like an attack. And I never mean for my Instagram posts to come. I really, truly, genuinely want every post to like somehow inspire people to change or to, you know how it is. But some things are easily twisted. But yeah, you're right. That's funny about crumble cookies. Yeah, I'm like, there's no way. The base of cookies is cake. I'm pretty sure it's Duncan Hines cake mix. I'm almost positive it's cake batter. Yeah, they're good though. I've heard I can't eat them, they're gluten, but I've heard they're fantastic.
I mean, unbelievable. Like I'm the first to admit, I'm like, it tastes phenomenal. Fantastic. Like I would eat 12 of those, no problem. If you let me in the cake house, I would eat that, and I would, 100%. So I'm like, when we were there, she's like, how many should we buy? I'm like, all right, well, let's, we'll try the 2, and she wanted more. So we got 4. And of course they were eating right. Like there was
all good.
no way that's going to last more than 24
Yeah,
hours,
nice.
so, and then I was like, all right, well, maybe not for a little while again. Right.
Yeah,
And it's like, but the thing is, I sympathize with people. I can make that call now, but it took a lot of training. I'm
yeah,
disciplined.
yeah,
I've been through the gutter like a bunch of times where I don't want to end up there again. It's
totally.
extremely difficult. Like, so I sympathize
Yeah,
with them, and I get
yeah,
it. At the same time, it's like you still have to, at some point, that choice has to be made. And then if there is people, that's why thankfully there's people such as yourself helping them go through those processes and making it easier with your content and or working with you, right? So I do want to say thank you for doing that.
yeah, yeah. I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's rewarding for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Let's pack it up there. I want to make sure everybody knows where can they follow you, what's the best place, and we'll link it at the bottom as you're talking.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm on virtually every platform as the ketogenic nutritionist. I do have a podcast on Spotify as well, the ketogenic nutritionist. I'm on Twitter as Temple Dietitian, a little random, but yeah, follow me, DM me any questions you guys have, and I'm looking forward to hearing from your following. And thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So go follow her right now, guys. Obviously, you saw wealth of information, really good, cool insights, battled through health things herself, got out of that, and is only up leveling her knowledge. So thank you for being on the podcast interview, and I'm sure we'll talk again.